Do you ever watch the news or surf the internet and worry about all the dangers we seem to face as a country right now? I mean, we've all seen the dramatic increase in superstorms and natural disasters, right? But those of us who are more alert are also concerned about the reports from energy experts who are warning us about the dangers of nationwide rolling blackouts of our outdated electrical grid that could shut down food and water supply. And the World Health Organization's official report that we're long overdue for a pandemic disease outbreak that could literally wipe out millions and would trigger forced isolation of infected districts in the United States. And of course, our national debt continues to spiral out of control because our government can't seem to stop overspending its way to total financial collapse. And have you seen all the violent protests in our streets and looting mobs setting fire to our communities lately? Obviously, times have changed. And we now live in an era of a dangerous combination of wide-scale threats and a once civilized society that, when things get tough, they're just one hair trigger away from a complete and total meltdown. Now, if these images disturb you, trust me, you're not alone. As a 10-year combat veteran, I took an oath to defend against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And as a proud patriot, I still stand by that oath, which is why I'm talking today, because I've seen with my own eyes what a country in collapse looks like for its citizens. You see, most people don't even realize that our country's just-in-time supplies, like food and gas, operate on only a 3-day resupply cycle. In other words, during any wide-scale disaster or crisis, gas stations will be drained dry and grocery stores will be picked clean, all within 3 days. Now, combine that with the results of a recent survey that revealed 75% of American homes have no more than 3 days of food available to feed their families if there was a disaster that disrupted resupply. Now, what this means is that when collapse is finally triggered, within 3 days, nearly 8 out of every 10 Americans will find themselves trapped and spending the day desperately looking for food for their family. Millions who thought they could count on Washington to take care of them will suddenly find themselves hungry, abandoned, and helpless. Within just a few short days, you'll get a first-hand glimpse into how fast civilized society goes back to the barbarian days, when mobs of enraged citizens take to the streets in violent protests worse than what we're already seeing right now, looting and burning buildings out of fear, anger, and desperation. The federal government will have no choice but to declare martial law in an attempt to maintain order. You look out your window and see heavily armed police and soldiers and armored vehicles patrolling the streets, door-to-door raids looking for troublemakers, even confiscation of weapons and supplies like we saw in the government's armed response during Hurricane Katrina. Now, I know this may sound like some doomsday prepper conspiracy to some, but even Washington knows this to be true. And if you look closely, you'll notice that the government has already been preparing for the worst. For example, whistleblowers inside the NSA and other government agencies have leaked details about Washington's official spy program targeting honest, self-reliant American citizens they consider to be a potential threat. Our local police departments that were once staffed by officer-friendly are now equipped with riot gear, armored vehicles, and non-lethal crowd dispersion weapons. FEMA camp plans and materials are now staged for every county in the United States, ready for instant deployment during disasters or civil unrest. And military exercises like Jade Helm, specifically geared toward military response during declared martial law, are currently being conducted in at least 35 states that we know of. Now, I don't know about you, but it's obvious to me that Washington sees the writing on the wall. And if they're preparing military law enforcement for civil unrest, shouldn't you be ready as well? And after all, when the world around you crumbles, it's your eyes your family is going to be looking into for protection, not some politicians or soldiers, right? Now, hopefully you've been able to take some basic steps to be able to shelter in place at home during a disaster with enough food, water, and security. And if you're lucky, you'll be able to just hang out at home and wait out a threat. But here's where most people put their lives in serious jeopardy with the wrong decision because they don't realize the extreme levels they're dealing with. So consider this. What will you do when FEMA, the police, and hospitals become overwhelmed with the crisis outside your door? The grocery store shelves stay empty, and the people in your area become more desperate, afraid, and panicked. What happens when order turns to disorder, peace turns to violence, and military police are patrolling the streets? Now, you and I both know that most people will be looking to the government to come in and take care of them. But as we clearly saw during Hurricane Katrina, there will be no safe place to take your family. And everyday citizens like you and me were trapped with murderers and rapists and victimized in so-called FEMA safe shelters. And even if you live outside the city, you can expect to see an instant influx of gangs and crime as a mass of people try to escape the chaos in the urban areas. And don't think you can just hunker down behind a locked door with your shotgun or rifle and spray paint a looters will be shot sign to protect yourself. I don't care how great of a shot you are or how big your ammo stockpile is. You're no match for an armored military force or even a hungry mob who realizes that you have food and water while they don't. Now, our it takes is one flaming Molotov cocktail thrown at your home to force you and your family out into the open, vulnerable, and with all of your supplies destroyed. Look, in all my years in the military and helping people with their emergency plans, this is the number one thing I can share with you now that will help you be better prepared today. It's the realization that even the best plans can fail. And if you ever hope to survive, you damn well better have a plan B to escape the chaos and protect yourself and those you love. The cold hard truth is that sometimes, if you and your family want to live, you have to leave and escape to a safer location before tragedy strikes. In survival terms, we call this type of forced evacuation bugging out. And it's typically the exact opposite of what most people are preparing for, especially if you're older or just can't see yourself leaving your home for a safer place.
I'm here at a moment. Opportunity to build a constructive, peaceful world order. It's very good.
I have in my possession a secret map by the planners of the New World Order.
Because the global order is changing again.
A New World Order. Jared Kushner's building at 666 Fifth Avenue has been losing money and tenants for years, according to the Washington Post. 49.5% of the offices are owned by Stephen Roth of Vornado Realty Trust, and if you know how to enumerate those stones worn smooth that come from the King of Tyrus, you should have no trouble understanding the connection between 666 and the aforementioned individuals. Their rock is not as our rock, and we saw about 10 days ago that the United States ran a $666 billion deficit in fiscal 2017, and that it was the sixth highest on record. 666 is ultimately a fixed moment in time when Satan, the king of Tyrus means rock, the false rock, appears as Antichrist in Jerusalem, and that happens at the sixth seal, the sixth trumpet, and the sixth vial. That's what 666 means ultimately, but obviously that hasn't happened yet. Right now we're in 555, which is a time of teaching as well as the time of the formulation of the actual New World Order that emerges at the woe of the fifth trumpet, which Satan and his angels are cast from heaven unto the earth. Then it's wounded to death, as it's written in Revelation 13, and the fifth vial is the deadly wound that you can read of in Revelation chapter 16, and only then, after the deadly wound to the political system, we go from 555 to 666, which is when Satan appears as Antichrist, and the one world political system becomes a one world religious system. But before that happens, the great horn of the he-goat, written of in Daniel chapter 8, must first be broken, so to speak. The he-goat symbolizes the shadow government of the Kenites, the sons of Cain. Those are those stones that came from that false rock, with the great horn of the he-goat being the United Nations, which will provide the skeletal structure for the actual New World Order, just as the League of Nations provided the skeletal structure for the United Nations. And if you want to research this in detail, look up the Daniel 11 hypothesis on biblicalresearchlabs.com for the free PDF. As it's written in Daniel chapter 8, verse 8, once this great horn of the he-goat is broken, for it came out four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. The four winds always meaning the 5-month-long hour of temptation, also known as Daniel's 70th week. It was 7 years, but as we know from Revelation chapter 9, it has been shortened to 5 months. Christ promised those days would be shortened in Matthew 24 and Mark 13. So it isn't 7 years anymore, it's 5 months, and they begin with the woe of the fifth trumpet, with Satan and his angels, Daniel's fourth beast, are cast from heaven unto the earth. This is when the he-goat becomes the leopard written of in Daniel chapter 7, the infrastructure of the one world political system, the Kenites, the sons of Cain, and their four hidden dynasties of education, economics, politics, and religion. Notice in Daniel chapter 7, verse 6, the leopard has four heads, the four hidden dynasties, and upon the back of it, four wings of a fowl, because the deception has to go out throughout the earth via the airwaves. That's why it says wings, four being the number of earth, to control the minds of the people of the world. This global political system will also have feet like the feet of a bear, as we know from Revelation chapter 13, and the bear you'll also find written of in Daniel 7. This is the atheistic, communistic, non-Christian nations headed by Russia Persia, who is the king of the north of Daniel chapter 11, as well as Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, written of in Ezekiel chapter 38. This is Esau, who is called Edom, which means red, that red nation, heading a confederacy, which includes Turkey and Iran, as well as others. And we see that formulating now, even Islamism, I like to call it, for the sake of simplicity. And remember, Esau married one of the daughters of Ishmael all the way back in Genesis. This political beast also has the mouth like the mouth of a lion, as we know from Revelation 13, which symbolizes the Christian nations up until 666, which is when they begin to whore after Satan, thinking that he's Jesus' return, being slain spiritually. They're that third written of in Revelation chapter 9 that dies spiritually. A third of the world is Christian. And how can you die spiritually if you didn't already have eternal life abiding within you? Isn't it common sense? So going back to Daniel chapter 7 and the lion written of there, you have Ephraim, Manasseh, and Judah being plucked up by the roots, symbolic of that falling away written of in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the great apostasy as it's known. Ephraim is the United Kingdom in the British Commonwealth, Manasseh is the United States, and Judah is Germany, who obviously had the European Union now that Brexit is underway. That was all part of the plan all along, as you can see from this post-war New World map that was published in 1942. Not 100% accurate or anything, but it gives you a basic idea of the blueprint of the future New World Order. We're still in the wars and rumors of war stage of this. There's no New World Order yet, but it's formulating, and once Satan and his angels are cast to earth, that's Daniel's fourth beast, the supernatural, with the 10 horns, which are 10 fallen angel kings, the New World Order, the one world political system, finally comes into being. That happens at the woe of the fifth trumpet, then is wounded to death, then Satan appears as Antichrist at the woe of the sixth trumpet, and immediately after Satan's tribulation, the true Christ returns at the woe of the seventh trumpet. So understand the three woe trumpets written of in the book of Revelation, and you shouldn't have any problem understanding how this is going to happen. The true Christ doesn't return until the woe of the seventh trumpet, which begins the great tribulation, the tribulation of Almighty God. There are two tribulations, and the great tribulation, God's tribulation, begins immediately after the tribulation of Satan. Again, there is no New World Order yet, so don't think that the deadly root is underway. If anything, it's the breaking of the great horn of the he-goat, and what happens after that? 4 notable ones will come up toward the 4 winds of heaven, and those are the 4 beasts that make up the political beast that you can read of in Daniel chapter 7 as well as Revelation 13. 4 is the number of earth. It's a one-world political system. Remember what Christ said in Mark 13, when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, be ye not troubled, for such things must needs be, but the end is not yet. So look around. Are you hearing of wars and rumors of wars? Well, then the end is not yet. World peace is the key to a one-world government. So what are we to do while waiting for this 5-month-long hour of temptation to begin? Aside from planting seeds of truth from our Father's Word, Christ tells us what we are to do. In Mark 13, in the last verse, Christ tells us, what I say unto you, I say unto all, watch. Let me watch.